everyone, and thank you for joining us for our presentation. We're here to give you a presentation on the who, what, where, when, why, and how of transition. Next slide.
Today, we hope to provide you a general overview of transition, demystify the transition process, provide you with tools to navigate the transition process, empower you to have hopes and dreams of positive outcomes for your child, motivate you to start planning for the future, and definitely give you hope.
A little bit about who we are. We're here to share our experience with transition. Kristie is a marvelous transition coordinator at Kalani High School, and she works with students and families that are going through this process. That is her job. They are one of the key positions, in my opinion, in special education. People don't often know about them and the key role they play. Kristie does her very best every day to plug in families and students with those post-high school outcomes and those dreams that they're having. Thanks, Kristie.
Thanks for having me. And I want to introduce all of you to Debbie Kobayakawa. Debbie is infamously known as Ian's mom, and that's how I first met her many, many years ago in the Windward District. Actually, I first met Ian working at a Safeway, and eventually I had the privilege of working with Debbie side by side as we help parents go through the transition. So this is Debbie. She wears many, many hats. Great resource. Thanks for having me, Debbie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And a little bit about Ian's journey. Since exiting the Department of Education in 2010, Ian has been working for Safeway. He just received his 13-year PIN, and he moved into a group home 12 years ago. So he really loves his independence, and he loves to work. He loves to be a contributing part of his community. And this is all through that planning process and the team of people all working really hard together. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So if you're feeling lost and confused, you're absolutely in the right place for that, because feeling overwhelmed, feeling underwhelmed sometimes, second guessing your goals, we all have these anxieties and worries and fears about our children, and we don't want to do the wrong thing. We don't want to make mistakes. And this is very, very normal. And this is kind of how you really should be feeling. And all parents of kids, with or without a disability or an IEP, are having some of the same kinds of thoughts and feelings. We're all worried about the trajectory for our kids. Where are they, how are they going to succeed? How are they going to be independent? It's just for our kiddos with special needs that sometimes those supports are a little more extensive, and sometimes they need more time. All of these things are totally normal. Next slide, please. So you are in the right place. Transition is a scary time. I can remember it sounded like the world's biggest clock was sitting next to me, and all I heard was tick tock, tick tock. There is all this information, all these services, supports, things to choose from, things that have acronyms attached to agencies, and parents aren't really even sure what they do, what their role is. We have a lot of decisions to make. And I know for myself, I felt very overwhelmed and I felt underprepared. But the thing that I think was the most helpful was relying on my team. So I just want you folks to know you're in the right place, and we're going to help you, hopefully to give you some information that's going to help you work with your team. Next slide.
So what is transition? So transition services are within the IEP. It is a coordinated set of activities that's designed to be within a results-oriented process. So what does that mean? That means there's a lot of questions that your team may be asking you. And this isn't to judge you. It isn't to find out what you're not doing and make you feel unprepared, but this is definitely to gather information. So there might be a lot of questions that your team may ask you about where do you feel your child will be living in 6 years from now. And that's a lot to think about, but it's something that's where we start, right? Where do they want to live? Is there a job that they want to get? How are they going to participate in socialization or recreation, right? And all of this is to help the team so that we can facilitate the smoothest transition from the DOE to any type of post-school activities, right? Like, so I mentioned before, it includes whether they're going to go to college or some kind of training program, on-the-job training, vocational, whether it's integrated or supportive. What are they going to do for independent living? So lots of questions, lots to think about. And these things can change daily. It can change weekly. It can change yearly, but that's all based on experiences. So again, what does it look like in the IEP, right? We look at what your child's strengths are. What are their preferences and interests? You'll hear these referred to as PINs, P for preferences, I for interests, N for needs, and S for strengths. We really want to look at your child's strengths and build upon that. Right? So looking at the pre-employment skills, this is where it starts. What can they do? Right? And we build from there. So related services, how can we utilize related services like speech, OT, and PT? So for example, if you want your child to be able to prepare their own meals, making a peanut butter jelly sandwich, how can we utilize related services to be able to open that jar of jelly or peanut butter and to be able to spread that jelly and peanut butter on a sandwich? Community experiences. How are we going to have them navigate safely? So we look at transportation, we look at crossing the street, stranger danger, all of those kinds of things out in the community. Right? We look at developing employment or other post-school living options. Right? What is that? Where are they going to live? And looking at how are they going to go toward employment if that's an option. Right? And also acquisition of daily living skills and functional vocational evaluation, right? What can they do? And we can use this information when we write IEP objectives. Now, who is this for, right? It's for all students with an IEP that are attending public schools. All of the students can access these transition services, right? As a transition resource teacher, we look at referring parents to outside agencies such as DVR or DDD. We help to facilitate the meetings that are there. And we coordinate these sets of activities so that our transition from DOE to any outside agency will be as smooth as possible. Right? Students with 504, that's a little bit different. They don't have the same right to school-based transition plans that students with IEPs do. However, we do include accommodations for that extra transition time, right? But it doesn't include goals. So there's a little difference between those with IEPs and those with 504 plans.
Okay, why is transition important? This is it. This is the only time that you're ever going to have this many people working together, all focusing on your child and what their needs are moving into the adult world. This is the only time that while you're under that umbrella of the education system, you have at your, I would say disposal lightly, but a resource for your team is always going to be your related service folks, like what Kristie was just saying, but also you have your special education teacher. You have any other support staff that are working with a student, which could include any kind of behavioral health specialist or a school counselor. You have maybe a gen ed teacher that also is part of your team that's working with your student in that gen ed setting. Then you have the family, which could include parents or grandparents, guardians, whoever that might be, the student, and any supports the student wants, but everyone working together to come up with goals, to come up with a trajectory and a plan for what life is going to look like once the student exits and ages out or gets a diploma and exits the Department of Education. This is the only time you'll have someone like Kristie who's going to coordinate and provide you those referrals and those linkages to those outside agencies you've heard us kind of speak about a little bit. So this includes the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, This also includes the Department of Health Developmental Disabilities Division. So you have someone to help you with that, to help you keep track of maybe phone call, who you spoke to, whatever that need might be. Because once you leave the Department of Education, you don't get a Kristie to help you anymore. You're on your own. So I really encourage you folks to maximize every single bit of the support you're going to get while you're in the education system. If you haven't met your school's transition teacher yet, please get a hold of your school over the summer. This is a great time because admin is in. It's a good time to call and maybe make an appointment for a phone conversation with one of your administrators at your school to ask about that, to ask about your school's transition teacher. Some schools don't have one, and you would need to check with your team to find out who's going to be taking on that role. But it's such an important time in a student's life, and this is the most help you're going to get. So I really can't stress why it's such an important time. Next slide, please. We're also going to look at the major areas of need. This includes employment, and not all folks are employment ready, or employment might not be the primary goal upon leaving the Department of Education. It might be post-secondary education or training. We have a great community college system here that also is part of our UH system. Folks sometimes think that, their individual with a disability can't attend post-secondary education, but there's lots of supports out there. We also look at things like financial literacy, one's ability to, keep track of their money, take care of their bills, spend their money wisely. We look at economic security, so that ability to create income in order to become independent financially from their parents at some point. Housing is another huge one, and it's a really huge one in Hawaii because our cost of living and our cost of housing is one of the highest in the nation. So again, looking at what those housing options are, maybe getting on a wait list for some things is always a wise idea. And then looking at self-sufficiency. How is this student going to be as self-sufficient as they're able to, given their potential? And what does that look like? And then what are the supports needed in those major areas to help them reach their potential and then stay there? Next slide, please.
So when do we start? Usually, most students enter high school at about age 14. So this is when formally we start to talk about transition, right? We ask those questions about what the future will look like. But beginning at age 16, this is when we must provide transition services for your child, right? However, the day your child is born, that's when you start to think about what's life going to be like for them. That's when you have hopes and dreams for your children, right? The day they're born. Our students are eligible to stay within the DOE and receive services up until their 22nd birthday or the day they graduate with a diploma, all right? So think about, I'd like to ask parents, what is the day after graduation with a diploma or their 22nd birthday gonna look like? Visualize what that is, right? Find out information along the way. Talk about your hopes and dreams with the team. Talk with other parents, see what's out there, right? Ask your child also. That's important. Finding out what they visualize for themselves and how is this gonna fit within the transition to adulthood.
And I think this is a really big question, and it's the where do we start? And I think that's the hardest part with many things, but especially with this one, because of course it's hard, so we want to put it off and avoid it, but it really is the hardest start. So I say it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. You just got to rip it off and make yourself do it. But again, kind of piggybacking on what Kristie just shared about what will your child's look like after that 22nd birthday, and what will they do all day, right? Most of our kiddos, not all, but most of them got picked up in early intervention. And then a lot of our kids were made eligible at the age of 3. So all they have known is going to school from the age of 3 until they exit the Department of Education. That day took up most of their day. Typically you're looking at like a 7:30 to 2:30 kind of a thing. So what are they going to do? And how are you going to go out and continue to work and provide for your family if your child is home all day and doesn't have something to do or a place to go or supervision? So we want to encourage you folks to think about now, what a good life for your child could look like once they leave the Department of Education. Where might they go to recreate? That means to be with people that are their peers, where they can socialize and communicate and enjoy activities together, where they can access the same things that everyone is doing. What does community integration look like, and how well they be integrated in their community? Maybe they're going to become a Special Olympics athlete, or maybe they're going to join some type of a club or even a volunteer group. Those are all things that our kids can be participating in. I want you to really think and have those hopes and dreams, and dream about what a great life would look like. Look at your child one day and start looking at them through a lens of strength, of the things that they do really well. And don't be afraid to guess wrong. It's okay. I had a ton of things I thought my son would like to do for employment, and I was wrong about all of them. And I needed to just zip it and let him tell us that he wanted to be a courtesy clerk at Safeway, because you know what? He's had the job for 13 years. Pretty sure he knew exactly where he wanted to work. So we just need to start. Thanks. Next slide, which rolls into the how. And really, a lot of it is overcoming our fears. We have fears of failing our children. I think all parents do. I think we are especially fearful of allowing our child with special needs or disability to fail, because we feel like there's so many things that they struggle to do. We just don't want to see them struggle to do one more thing or to fail. And that's a very sensitive point for a lot of us. But I've learned over time, and it's taken me a long time, but sometimes in order to allow our children to succeed, we have to let them fail. And it's the same for my so-called neurotypical son. I had to let him fail multiple times, but eventually they figure it out. So I want to encourage all of you to not operate out of fear. It's a hard thing to do, and I'm not always able to do it. I'll be very honest, but I try my best not to. And when I'm in that fear zone, then you go to your safe place with your trusted folks and you let it all out. And then for me, I just sort of then shove it back in the closet and get on with it, because if I let that fear overtake my decisions, it will. And so I've learned to just sort of, run with my gut feeling and try not to live in that space where I'm making decisions because I'm afraid and I'm fearful. Now's the time for you as parents to have your hopes and dreams for your child. It's absolutely appropriate. They're in the education system. This is where they're learning and getting their education. We want you to share your vision of what a good life looks like for your child with your team. That could be anything. For me, it was my son working at Safeway, because that's what he wanted, and he was able to tell me that. And so we really focused hard on that. And now he has that good life. And some things had to go by the wayside, and that's just how that is. But it's important that we had our priorities and that they were my son's priorities. So I can't stress enough to just start somewhere. Be kind to yourself, be gracious, and allow yourself to make mistakes. Every one you make, you're getting closer to what does work. Next slide. You're muted, Kristie.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for that, Debbie. Sorry. I'd like to say that, like how Debbie said, don't be afraid to let yourself fail. We fail forward, right? We learn from our mistakes and how we can do better next time. Now, given that, think about, like Debbie said, right? What are your child's strengths? What is your child's superpower? Now, this is a really hard question for people to answer, but we all have our own superpower, right? It could be, it doesn't have to be academics, right? It could be a musical ability, it could be memorizing state capitals, or just that beautiful smile that lights up the room. Everybody has something to offer, right? And that will help us feel connected and feel valued by everyone around us. We want to look at more of what your child can do. Imagine what they can do with the supports around them, right? Look at your child's ability and not disability, what they can do, and use that superpower in how they can make a wonderful life for themselves. Debbie, I want to turn this one over to you.
Thank you. So a few things to consider and for your IEP teams and looking at what the outcome is going to be. There is the diploma track, and then we have what's called the certificate of completion track. And a lot of times parents just sort of go with the flow, and in middle school or even sometimes elementary school, it's just sort of assumed that the student's going to be on that certificate of completion track. And now things are sort of trending where more students are accessing the general education curriculum, and more students are actually starting out on a diploma track. And I always say, let your information guide you, and also let that IEP guide you. If a student, like for example, my son's IEP, by the time he was a sophomore in high school, he really wasn't accessing any of the general education curriculum. Our information told us over many years that he just wasn't able to successfully access it. So he had a very specialized, individualized education program that was delivered in what we would call a fully self-contained special ed classroom, and was on a certificate of completion. We were all really comfortable with that. He had not been accessing the general ed curriculum since elementary school. The target for us was employment, independence, enabled, him being able to navigate independently in his community, and eventually being able to move on his own, because he couldn't live with me forever if I'm not going to live forever. So those were our choices. I'm currently working with some families right now who have kiddos. Some may have an autism diagnosis, and they are working on a diploma track. There's no guarantees, and the law doesn't require the Department of Education that students are guaranteed a diploma if that's what they are attempting to do. It's the same for all students, right? So what we want to make sure is that we're making the correct decisions based on everything in the IEP, and that is what's driving these things, correct? So a student that's working on a diploma would be probably having some progress towards that general ed curriculum. Those students often need accommodations delivered in that setting. Some special education students need even more increased supports. So we always look at that. And then we also look at the time. Some students just need more time in order to be successful. And then we want to look at, is it aligning with those post-high school outcomes, and what other supports are needed? When we look at sort of the certificate of completion, so for me as a parent, it was that lack of progress in the general education curriculum. He needed accommodations and supports in a fully self-contained special education classroom. Those were unique and individual to his needs. And it did align with those post-high school outcomes. And he was able to actually successfully meet one of them, which was employment. And it was also in alignment with our family and the student values, because what Ian wanted was to work. He had no interest in going to any more schooling or accessing any post-secondary education or training. Apparently, he felt that he had enough information to go out into the world and be successful. And thus far, he has proven himself to be able to do that. Next slide, please.
All right, so more information is great to have for you parents as you make your decision, as your team makes the decision. So here's a side-by-side comparison chart between high school diploma and a certificate of completion. So what does it mean? What does it mean to get a high school diploma? It means that the child has met all the requirements for graduation, right? What does it mean to have a certificate of completion? It means that the student has completed high school, but didn't meet the requirements for graduation. Now, what are those requirements for graduation? Right? For a high school diploma, they need to meet minimum course and credit requirements. That's not the same for certificate of completion, right? This one means that your student has met his IEP goals that support progress toward their post-secondary transition goals, but has not met the requirements for a high school diploma. So this is where it's good to have that conversation with your team. What is right for your child? Accommodations are allowed on both. Curriculum modifications for a high school diploma, it might be, right? The answer is maybe. But for certificate of completion, yes, curriculum modifications are allowed. Accepted by the military, a high school diploma, yes. A certificate of completion, not so. And accepted by employers, yes for high school diploma, and for certificate of completion, it depends, right? Depends on the employer and the job qualifications. So having this information, I feel, is important for you and for your team as you make this decision with your child in high school.
Okay, my favorite, age of 18. So at the age of 18, your child is a legal adult. The rights, the educational rights will transfer to your child unless you seek to become either their educational representative or you have a power of attorney or guardianship. What I want to make sure is that folks know you do not have to have guardianship to keep educational rights. That is not a fact, that is fiction. Guardianship is a very restrictive process, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we want to make sure that you folks know you have options. Next slide. And what are those options? So self-representative. So I'll use my oldest son as an example. He turned 18 in high school. He had an IEP. He was a legal adult at 18. He was able to represent himself. He maintained his own educational rights. However, he's allowed to invite anyone he wants to his IEP meeting. So he invited his mother and allowed me to help advocate for him, but it was his voice, and he was able to do that with my support. You can also become an educational representative for your child, which means you have the rights to make educational decisions only. You can have a power of attorney for special education. And then you can also have a full legal guardianship, which is a legal proceeding. I hired an attorney to do mine, and I did do a guardianship for my son, not because of educational rights, but because we felt at the time, and we still agree, that being his legal guardians was the best choice for our family. It's a very personal decision, and no one should ever tell you you have to do it. They should just give you what your options are. I will say that a guardianship is costly. If you're paying for an attorney, most families are looking upwards of $5,000, I hear in the field these days. There is a pro se packet folks can get and attempt to file on their own, and you can save, you can save some money by doing some of the paperwork yourself. Next slide.
So these are your options that Debbie just went over in a little bit more detail, right? From the Department of Education, we are required as part of the IEP to inform you about the transfer of rights. But again, like Debbie mentioned, you don't have to obtain guardianship. That's not the only option. These are the different options that are there. The educational representation, it's free. It only obtains the educational rights only though. A power of attorney for special education, that's also free. And legal guardianship. This one is a legal proceeding, as Debbie had mentioned. It does cost a bit of money, right? So this is conversations and decisions that need to be made as a family. It's a personal decision. I want to encourage you to check out the Footsteps to Transition website. There's a great video of a presentation that Amanda Ka'ahanui from SPIN and Debbie Kobayakawa did that talks about their personal journey in choosing what the right option was for their family. So check that page out. Check out that video. It's awesome. Thanks, Debbie and Amanda, for doing that for our communities.
Absolutely. So this is a really important reminder, and I can't say this enough. So that's why it's big and in bold and in blue. No action is an action. If you take no action and your child turns 18, the Department of Education in your school will assume that your child is going to be their own representative. This means that those educational rights have transferred to the student. And that is absolutely, completely legal on the school's part. It is up to us as parents to request to have those educational rights given to us. So we are the ones who must take an action. Otherwise, the student becomes their own representative and they have the educational rights. And this can be really important if our kids are going to stay in school past the age of 18. So I can't stress enough what an important action this is. And then you can always take the time to exercise what your options are and to get more information. And like Kristie shared, please hit up the Transition to Footsteps. We take a much deeper dive into what all those things look like. And I think that will give you some more information to help you make an informed decision on this matter. Next slide. Just listing some of our sources, and you can take a screenshot on these. Again, we hit up the Footsteps of Transition. A couple of things highlighted on there, the Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities, ABLE program. ABLE accounts are a better life for everyone. That's a big financial resource right now. And CALS Law, which allows Medicaid recipients to receive up to 3 times their Social Security income in what we call earned income from employment. So this is great because someone like my son who works, he can continue to earn money and he won't get kicked off of Medicaid, which is what makes his life work. Social Security is a little bit different animal, and that's a whole different story, but CALS Law really protects our Hawaii residents who are on Medicaid so that they can be employed, earn an income, and maintain the MedQuest and Medicaid services that make their lives work. Next slide, please. A little plug for Ho'omana Parent Support. We're past our April 26th virtual open house, but if you go to our website, we have our 2022 and our 2021 virtual open house on our website. We are working on getting the 2023 up into a YouTube channel, and that'll be available. Give you a quick summary of many programs and services and supports available for our kids and our families out there. Next slide, please. A little bit more information. Again, I think I spoke on these. Just want to make sure folks know that ABLE accounts do allow us to put money away for our children that may be on entitlement benefits, so Social Security or Medicaid. This allows us to put some money away for them to make their lives better when we're not here to supplement their income and pay for the things that we often do because they don't earn enough money to be able to do that on their own. And next slide. And mahalo, we thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope this information's been helpful. Kristie, I'll let you say aloha.
Yeah, aloha everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this little tidbits have provided information to get started. And we wish you all the best. And again, this is a marathon that we are here to join you on and support you throughout. So again, mahalo, thank you so much. Thank you, Spin and Debbie Kobayakawa for inviting me to offer my mana'o. Aloha. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristie.